Well, that was another intense race, but the one thing I want to talk about from the Brazilian Grand Prix this weekend was again the incident between Verstappen and Hamilton. Was Verstappen too aggressive? Did he intentionally run Lewis wide? And should he have been given a penalty? Your thoughts in the comments below please, and remember to keep it nice. So let's get into it. First, let's talk about the run-up to the incident. It was lap 48 and Hamilton gets a good run out of the final corner. He's using DRS and is pulling Verstappen in very quickly towards the end of the straight. As you can see in this image, Hamilton jinked left in the braking zone, making it look like he was going to have a lunge into turn 1. I expect Verstappen caught this in his mirror and so came down to the inside on turn 1 a little earlier than usual in order to block Hamilton. But in fact, it was a dummy by Hamilton who stayed up to the right of the circuit, close to the optimum racing line. As Verstappen had turned into turn 1 too early, the natural momentum pushed him out slightly wide in the middle of the corner and therefore restricted his entry and exit of turn 2, which as we all know is critically important to lap time at Sao Paulo, and especially when you have Lewis Hamilton behind you with DRS and that new Mercedes power unit. Out of turn 3 and onto the next straight, Hamilton is getting a great run on Verstappen, who on this occasion moves once to defend to the left. So Hamilton moves to the outside into the clear track. And this is where things get really interesting. Hamilton's a little ahead of Verstappen heading into the braking of turn 4. And both drivers get on the brakes at a similar point. At this point, Hamilton's in the strong position on the cleaner racing line, a wider racing line around the outside and ahead of Verstappen, and it was all looking very good. He did everything right, and as far as I can tell, would have made it around the corner within the track limits. It was Verstappen who was on the back foot, and he knew that if Hamilton got past, he had a very little chance of overtaking again, and that 7-point gain would turn into a 7-point loss. Being on the dirty part of the circuit, on a tighter line, and with your opponent just in front of you is a weak position. That's why when we usually see this type of racing, the driver on the outside normally comes out on top. It's really risky being on the inside and slightly behind. It's very easy to brake slightly too late and run into your opponent. However, Verstappen managed to get in front of Hamilton before the corner and so owned it. Granted, we all know he ran wide, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. But back to this phase of the corner. Verstappen managed to get slightly in front of Hamilton as he started to release his brake pressure earlier than usual. This basically rolls a bit more speed into the corner, but it will change the balance of the Red Bull, causing it to understeer. When you start to release your brakes earlier than normal as you turn into the corner, there's slightly less weight over the front tyres, and so they're not pushed into the track quite as hard as they need to, resulting in that understeer. And that seems to be exactly what happened. Verstappen missed the apex and then missed the exit of the corner entirely, running a very long way off the corner. He wasn't even close. I'll discuss the fairness of this soon, but get yourself in Verstappen's absolute competitiveness racing driver head for a second. Lewis was loads faster in Brazil. There's a potential 14-point swing all based around this move. This is really important. Do you let Lewis sail around the outside and drive away from you, or do you risk contact or a penalty and try to hang on to the position and potentially the championship for one more lap? As yet, we still haven't seen an onboard from Verstappen, which is weird, and actually it's happened a few times this year when I've been making these videos. One question that I've seen quite a lot is if he turned out or not. Did he open the steering wheel? But to be honest, that question is pretty much irrelevant. Maybe Verstappen did open the steering wheel, but that could have been to correct some oversteer. You often see drivers turn the car into the corner and then open the steering wheel slightly as the car rotates. Alternatively, even if he didn't open the steering wheel, he could have still intentionally have pushed Hamilton wide. The steering wheel isn't the only tool the drivers have to affect the trajectory of a Formula 1 car. As I explained earlier, the brake pedal has just as much influence of how the car is positioned on the racing line. So Verstappen rolling off the brakes earlier is pretty much the same as him opening up the steering wheel. And that's what I believe Verstappen did, because that way he could could carry a bit more speed into the corner, get ahead of Hamilton, and then running wide to the outside of the corner. So was this move right? Was it legal? As we know, the FIA said there was nothing wrong with the move. They decided to let them race. But in my opinion, this is completely wrong, and I can't understand why they've come to this conclusion. If Verstappen had done the same thing but managed to keep the car within the white lines, I would have been happy. He'd have braked, been slightly ahead of Hamilton, and made the corner. Job done. It still would have been very aggressive, as Hamilton would have been pushed off the track, but at least Verstappen would have made the corner as required. But he wasn't even close. He was off the track. At the very least, he should have given the position back to Hamilton. Hamilton did everything right here and lost out on the overtaking manoeuvre. And again, this is the problem with the runoff areas. If there was grass and a gravel trap on the outside, Verstappen would have approached the whole situation differently. But with the runoff, many drivers would prefer to save the position right in that moment and fight the penalty later. I don't know about you, but I don't like to see these penalties and the decision coming after all the actions taken place on track. Anyway, let me know what you think about this incident and make sure you subscribe to Driver 61 for more of the F1 breakdown. Cheers, and I'll see you next time.